before we turn on the recording,
Too late, sir.
what? No. It's never too late.
It's never too late. It's always right on time.
Oh, it's recording?
Yes.
Oh. I guess all that's needed, besides an opening song,
I don't know that
is...
Here we are?
Let's go with that.
Let's see here. Here we
Here
are.
we are. Here we are. And as always, until we decide to come in silence and meet in silence and just start recording, which I do want to do sometime.
Yeah.
We were talking about an opening song.
Yeah.
I think would be fun to do is Robert was interested.
Yeah, you had mentioned that.
And we could talk with him beforehand a little bit, but I think Robert, guitar, percussion, and maybe happiness or keys.
Yeah.
And that could even be an episode. Here we are, recording an opening song.
In the studio. Here we are. Yeah. I don't know. Something to consider in the future.
Well, I was considering it now. For the future.
Gosh. Yeah. I'm always off a little bit on the time thing.
There is no past. I was just saying to somebody yesterday.
Yes.
There is no past, as a joke. I was saying to them yesterday. Anyway. Here we are.
Here we are. In the here and now.
Yes, what are we doing with this podcast? This should we break down the word podcast?
I would refrain from that.
Is that what we're calling it? Is that what it's called?
A podcast?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so.
Let's go with it.
Seems like
a popular thing. It's what all the kids are doing.
Yeah.
That's why we're doing it, right?
Oh, of course. Because
Just
everyone else.
To stay relevant.
Yes.
Why are you doing a podcast?
Why am I doing a podcast? I suppose it's because I feel like I've always felt from an early age. I remember being on the bus in like 5th grade and having conversations with my friend and thinking, man, I really wish that was recorded.
It's cool.
Yeah. I mean, looking back on it, I haven't thought about that particular instance in a long time. But when you brought that, it's like the origin story just came back. I was like, I have a lot of interesting conversations, and I just felt like I find them interesting, and others I believe would as well. And I think that's at the heart of what a podcast is having interesting conversations that others find interesting as well,
Yeah.
That's my origin story. Why are you doing a podcast?
I don't know. It was in my calendar. It said podcast with Matt this morning. Bright and early, 10:30. I think part of it is it's a way to know what I'm thinking. Well, having conversations definitely is a way for me to understand myself more and what I'm brailing about the world and keep updated with, the downloads that I'm getting. Some people are good at journaling, not so much.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because as soon as you said that, in my mind went to my journaling practice, right? Like that's a pretty much an everyday thing for me, and it serves the same purpose for me of getting my thoughts out of my head, kind of seeing the state of the world, but the world being in my head.
You could actually be doing this podcast without me, Just come on and a reading from the journal of Matt. I could be doing it without you. Just give me a journal. So here's what I think about a topic. Let's hear what Matt has to say. I hope nobody reads this. This could be good.
Yeah, I can honestly say that would not be a particularly interesting podcast just to read from my journal. When I write my journal, it's for other purposes, it's really not for entertainment. while there might be every now and then some poetry will slip in there, right? Like I'll just continue writing in prose, but all of a sudden it slips into a poetic voice, and suddenly I'm like, I'm waxing poetically. But I mean, surprisingly little for a poet's journal. Yeah, I think it would be slightly disappointing. Although I'm sure there's tons of gold to be mined from the stack of journals that I've filled at this point.
Yeah. So not for entertainment.
Not particularly, no.
This is for entertainment.
This is, I hope it's entertaining. You know, it's my intention.
I've been entertained each time. That's what will keep me coming back.
Yeah.
Coffee time. You like?
It's delicious. Yeah.
The 17 ingredient morning mix.
17 ingredients.
Thank you, Whitney. You got me started on this.
Yes.
I was a musician from young age, and now I'm a musician from an older age. But there'd be times we would be, we were a cover band. When we got the band together, we were a cover band and we played out and so on. But we also wrote our own stuff and jammed our stuff, and there were so many times that felt like we were just going into a zone. It's like, should have had the recorder on. Right?
Yeah.
So I was just musing about that as you talked about being on the bus and wish we'd recorded this conversation.
Yeah.
For me, it was wish we recorded this subtle space we went to musically.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's in those moments of improvisation and just being in the moment with what is, right? I think that's where the gold gets mined, right? Like that's where it all comes from, is just being there. I think that's, largely the aim of this podcast is, here we are.
Yeah. I'm going to segue into a shower conversation I was having this morning.
With yourself?
Actually, no.
Hey!
It was about authenticity.
Yes.
And we talked about this the other night a little bit in the Trust Lab space. I never said this before, but the realization that I get authenticity hangovers. And
yours or others? Like the presence of authenticity from others, or being authentic yourself?
Yes, I think all of that. Courtney just went to a wedding, and she said, it was a big dose of that, right? People just not being willing to go to deeper levels. And we speculated about, the use of alcohol being, because it's so painful, to not be authentic. And then some semblance of authenticity comes out when people are drunk, but it's usually not like a very...
it's not refined, it's raw.
Refined, pure, it's raw. But at least some relief from the pain of being inauthentic. How long can we project out there an image or meet somebody else in a projected image?
So am I hearing correctly that an authenticity hangover is actually confronting the inauthentic? You're actually drained or diminished by experiencing fakeness, essentially.
Yeah. And you said it from others or myself. It's definitely when when I feel a need to come out to a level and present in a way that will have other people be comfortable enough. So it's like my value stack does a little shift from authenticity, only what I really care about or want to say, to including impact on others and their comfort. And I am just becoming more and more ruthlessly authentic, even around my family. But I'm also sensitive to my mom, who's 86. I don't need to drop any bombs on her.
Yeah.
I did use the word sexuality around my mom in terms
Oof.
of what I do.
Oof.
And the things that I lead.
Yeah.
Which I doubt she's ever used that word. She probably thinks of it as a scientific word. She was a nurse.
Yeah.
Not as a relational concept.
Yeah. She's more... How familiar is she with the Keynesian studies?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I may go back and ask some more. So I feel more and more emboldened to share things, but also being sensitive, right?
Yeah.
And there's some situations that, for me to be authentic, I need to extract myself, or I come across as being possibly rude, boring, confrontational, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But also I've had people tell me that when I say, I'm no longer interested in this conversation, thank you, and walked away, that it was like a profound moment for them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, wow, you can do that.
It's a permission slip.
Yeah. It's not saying you're boring.
Yeah.
It's just saying where the conversation is going, I'm no longer interested, and you seem to be into it, you two, so I'm out.
Yeah.
I'm not going to make up that I have to go to the bathroom or...
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, or my egg timer went off or something.
Yeah.
Mm.
Mm. I am impressed by that particular social move myself.
I'm no longer interested in this conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to vacate this. Yeah, I come from people-pleasing a mentality. You know, I'm a recovering people-pleaser, we'll call it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Still.
Mm-hmm. And within that space, you know, suffering through drudging conversations is part of the ticket. But I like the bluntness, the abruptness, and the honesty of that type of statement. I'm not interested in this conversation any longer, and I'm going to exit.
Yeah, you know, as you say abrupt, I think it's only abrupt if someone has a story that everything they talk about is interesting. Then it's abrupt.
Yeah.
But or it's abrupt if they're not attuned,
mm-hmm.
you know, and they're assuming everybody's fascinated or with them in their conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It would be abrupt if, you know, they totally are reading, or I was that, but usually I don't drop out of those conversations unless I really do have something in the oven or I gotta go pee.
Pressing engagement, yeah.
Yeah, pressing kidneys.
Yeah, it's I love it. You know, I love that like these are the spaces that we can access, and you know, as that becomes more of a acceptable prevailing sort of social norm. I mean, if that could become social norm, I mean, think about the minutes of arduous waiting that would be avoided.
As we sink into that, and the many minutes that we've already put in with that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mine is going a couple places. I know where you're going. One is like, so how do we gracefully extract ourselves? You know, if it is more authentic to leave or end or shift something.
Mm-hmm.
And well, it's just the whole concept of what is authentic, and that word is thrown out a lot. And yeah, I have doubts sometimes if we know it's authentic, or just believe there are layers. But one thing tells me that's an authentic impulse is when I have these sensations of an inauthenticity hangover, you know, there's like a real feeling about it. And I'm trying to develop my attunement to that sooner.
Yeah.
And it's kind of happening regardless of whether I like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm wincing because it means I cannot actually tolerate being in a conversation inauthentically.
Yeah.
More than a moment.
Yeah.
And even that feels really long to me now.
Yeah. I recognize that. Yeah. It's yeah, I'm finding the value of silence in those spaces. Where I step back and no longer have to, I pull my energy back, right? And from there I become an observer.
Step one.
Yeah. And in those moments when I can't, when I don't have anything calling the authenticity out of me, right? I prefer silence over welling something fake up to meet the energy of the room, right? You know, I'm actually quite grateful. I think since moving to New Mexico, the number of inauthentic engagements that I've had has dwindled to next to zero.
Chin chin.
Chin chin.
Yeah, they've gone down for me here too.
Mm-hmm.
Partly could be the place, partly who we're attracting.
Mm-hmm. Well, we live in a space. Taos, New Mexico is known for its characters, right? And and I think one aspect of Taos's overall ethos is the acceptance of the authentic self, whatever it may be. I see just a wide array of individuals embodying just who they are, unabashedly, kind of who they are. Yeah. Not in your face who you are, like not I'm performing my character into the world. No, I'm just being me, and that's all right.
Something that I've tracked through life, and now all of a sudden I have a New Mexico version of it. My experience. But where I grew up in the Midwest, well, I should say I left there when I was 22, so I didn't have a full adult experience there. But this is something I know about, around the country. The questions we ask to get to know. In the South, it's known that people ask, "Who's your family, son?" I'm not doing the heavy Southern accent right now, but what's your family? People trace things to family lineages as a way of locating a number of things. We're always interested where we are in the hierarchy of things.
Yeah,
we kind of can't help ourselves, whether we have a formal caste system or not. In the East, on the East Coast, it's what school? What school? That's very important. In the Midwest and other parts of the country, it's what do you do? And usually people are asking for, what's your occupation, your work, your means of income.
Right.
In the mountains in Colorado, where I lived most of my life, the question is kind of like, what are you up to, or what's your next adventure? Because it's so outdoor oriented. When I moved down into the city, the urban landscape, Colorado, it was the people that I was attracting and I was around is like, what are you creating? As entrepreneurs and creatives. Yeah. What are you creating? So if I come down to New Mexico and check in, I think what occurs to me is, how are you evolving? How are you evolving? How you, not that people say that.
Yeah. Right. It's not something that you hear, but it's sort of present.
How are you growing? What are you grappling with? What are you embracing in your journey?
Yeah. When you presented that sort of concept of the distinguishing, for me it was, what is alive? Like, what's alive in you? right? What's working its way through you?
The last few versions,
Yeah.
I would say the earlier ones, for me were more like locating somebody in that social structure, family, school.
Yeah.
And
No, I'm referring to like what I felt like the New Mexico version would be.
What's alive?
What's alive? What's alive for you?
It's one of my favorite questions.
Yeah. And sometimes it's like the effect of an eclipse on your nervous system, the shadow work you're doing. There's all various
The medicine
journey
sleep
you've just
patterns.
the dieta you're on.
For women, very open here about their cycles.
Yep.
The seasons.
Yep. How hermiting you've been.
Yeah,
that's a big one here.
Sometimes what's influencing you, what books or courses or courses of study, and what you're creating.
Yeah, what you're creating is definitely a big part.
I like it here.
I do as well.
And I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
As I look back through, my periods, I haven't lived on the East Coast or in the South, but, immediately those kinds of questions, which are like, meant as a locus, those don't interest me. But when I'm in a culture of like, what's alive for you right now?
Yeah, that's the juicy stuff, right?
Yeah.
That's it feels more pertinent. It feels more authentic. As to it's going across from the surface level of my family is this, the school I went to is this, to there is something that I am currently living out. I am being this journey of me. And are you interested in this is
Yeah. One of the things I like about that question, what's alive for you? Because a lot of times these other questions can have us guessing, what does this person want to know? Or what matters to them, or what do they find interesting?
Yeah.
But we say, what's alive for you? I watch people go into beautiful places and share something they probably would not have thought of sharing because they feel it's too trite. They might have said, this morning I was sleeping in, and I usually am up early and I take my dog out for a walk, and I feel something in my dream, and it's like this, and I wake up as my dog licking my foot, which is sticking out from the covers, and it just made me giggle. Like that. Or I looked out the window and I saw a bird, and it reminded me of a childhood dream that I wanted to fly. Things like that. And I love hearing those things, and usually, the conversations flow from that.
Yeah.
Because it's getting to what really matters, which is a step on the run to what really, really matters. And then what really, really, really matters.
Really, really matters.
Let's talk to her. I do have one strategy to share too when things get too much, but it's by agreement. Like it works with people who have an agreement that I don't want to talk just for the sake of talking.
Yeah.
Maybe I do sometimes. But if I'm talking to you or with you, I want it to make some difference over there. And when we start to get full, I think we're missing a signal to let people know. Usually it gets to the point where we just go, stop, right? Or I gotta go, or some discomfort. But usually we've checked out before that. So there's a communication missed.
Yeah.
And, the more we practice meditation, paying attention to ourselves, and we can start to read what's in the field and attune to another, we can start to see when they're leaving. Like if I keep going with the same thing, I'm going to start to lose you. and so this is the simple thing that says I'm getting full. I'm full. It's this little signal of the little pinky up.
Yeah.
And what that says is I'm getting full. It doesn't say, it's not necessarily like please stop. It's great for couples before it gets too hot. And it's not even saying that what you're saying is wrong or insulting. It'd be like, you could be complimenting me. I could just go like that because I just want to pause here. Because maybe the first thing you said was what I always wanted to hear from my dad, but never heard. And so I'm just not able to be fully present to what else comes, even if it's all good things.
Yeah.
I might just go like,
Yeah. I like it. I like it as a symbol. Everyone, use your pinky up as a sign of fullness.
Fullness. It could be like a compliment. Right?
Yeah.
But it also could stop us from getting overwhelmed or just not taking in somebody.
Yeah. It's interesting that you described it as fullness. I oftentimes find myself in those types of conversations that I'd like to vacate as feeling drained or being emptied, right? Like of the energy that I have, the capacity I have to be present, right? And it's in those moments. So it's just an interesting shift of reference point, right? Like of you feel like you're taking on too much, whereas I feel like I'm being taken from oftentimes. Yeah.
I suppose it could also mean, I'm no longer able to maintain a centered presence. Or I say use it early and often.
Early and often.
It could be like I'm starting to lose that.
Yeah. Yep.
And this matters so I don't.
Yeah. I'm just interested to I just think of ego and like, is this accessible to everyone? Is this specifically, is this able to be received in a way that doesn't trigger, it doesn't strike, I'm not enough, I'm not worthy, I'm boring, I'm any various number of things that could be self-diminishing from, and it's all just story, right? Like when we take other people's actions or feelings as personal assaults on ourselves, then we run into painful consequences.
We do it. So I'm introducing it to people I think can be with that, and I consider the alternative. The alternative is a vulnerability hangover. If you start to tell a story that maybe I've heard before, and I'm also thinking about somebody in my family who's not well, and after the first minute I start to just pretend like I'm listening, we're probably both going to have a inauthenticity hangover, because I'm going to feel it. I know I was faking it. I know I didn't really get the essence of your story, and you're probably going to know it too. But like, there's this weird silent agreement we have. I'll pretend I'm listening, and you're going to pretend I'm listening, because you started the story, so you want to finish it.
Yeah.
I've done that. I've been on both sides of it.
Yeah.
So, and there's some people, fragile ego, let's say, or just level of emotional maturity is it's not so tolerable to be with our own sensations about that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like I can, and sometimes I realize I've experienced it with you, where I feel like I've talked too long. You know, like I need to get going, and I'm thinking, I bet Matt wanted to say that for the last 3 minutes. Not just as a mental speculation, because I've noticed things. Like I'm talking for a while,
Yeah.
and you're shifting, and you had said you had needed to go, right? So I know that.
Yeah.
Like a knowing of that.
Yeah.
But it does take a willingness to sit with, pay more attention, or complete earlier, or something.
Yeah.
And looking at that doesn't make me a bad person.
No.
Right?
And also, it brings up for me that, the onus is still on me to say, I have to go. This has been a pleasure, but...
I like shared onus.
Yeah.
As a recovering pleaser,
yeah.
I recognize other pleasers.
Yeah.
And I probably take advantage of that sometimes. Like,
yeah.
I do get to talk more or something.
Yeah. I'll take the shared onus. Because I think it's an attunement. It's a subtle dance, right? That we are becoming better at all the time. And both parties within the dance have to attune to it, have to refine their abilities to dance appropriately, dance their own desires into the world. This comes up in our, in your Trust Lab experience, weekly, is let me start from what I want and allow that to be my sort of guiding principle of how I navigate. I think that's so important in a world where we are often taught to abandon ourselves for others.
I want to say comfort.
Yeah.
But it's assumed comfort. It based on some social agreements that we're most comfortable when we don't say things directly. Like that would be bad. But I want to say that this has the possibility of creating greater trust and up-leveling our conversations.
Yeah.
If it's understood in the right context. And that's why I say early and often. So don't wait to use it until like you're getting really irritated.
Yeah.
And use it like this, like, might as well be using this finger, right? It's just
right. It's before resentment has built up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's important.
And if you can cultivate it in a way that it's not apologetic, like, I hate to say it,
yeah,
but I gotta pee. You gotta pee, right?
Yeah.
And it comes out of care. I haven't introduced this to my mother yet. She's always the example when I'm thinking, like, of my true spiritual growth, right? Relationship with a parent.
Yeah.
But it comes out of a care. I think my mom could even understand. It's like, I care about what you're sharing. I want to be present to you. And there are things that pull our presence out. Needing to go pee.
Yeah.
Or I said I'd be somewhere. Or the way you're speaking of this isn't so interesting to me.
Yeah.
But you're interesting to me and what really matters to you.
Yeah. It's about, I think it's about not identifying with our current experience, right? Like if we take the identity of what I am delivering into the world, our conversation, as this individual doesn't care to hear this conversation that I identify as this conversation, therefore this individual doesn't want to hear me, right? Or doesn't find me interesting. And, that's the differentiation. And, like that's the self-centric sort of egoic principle, but this is an invitation to transcend that.
An invitation.
Yeah,
because recently with my mom, there was a significant death in the family, and after sharing, this is what happened, my mom goes right into logistics. And after a while, I start to lose interest in that. And yet I understand that's her way of navigating the pain, and she needs time before she can get closer to it. And some of that for her that I know about her is in private time. And her need to take care of me is to, keep above it a bit. So I'm not going to use some of those things they would say, like I'm no longer interested in this conversation or this, but I might ask questions just to direct back or comment. In this case, it was like, what a lovely human that we had the privilege to know. I cherish so many moments. So there's and in this case, Mom wasn't quite ready to go there to reminisce, but the time will come. So we had to also pay attention what is somebody ready for, capable of, and
I mean, but it's, you use that directive of your own personal desire, right? Your own personal desire to steer in the direction that felt more meaningful to you, And, the more we can do that, the more we can take that into our lives in these various ways, the happier we'll be, I think, the more fulfilled, and I think by following our own authentic desire, we invite more of that into our presence, right? From others, and then that permission slip is granted across the board, and suddenly we're in a community that is able to engage in that way.
I think people want it, and it usually means that we need to take that first step towards something different.
Yes.
Courtney and I were talking prior to going to the wedding, like, how do I, engage in meaningful conversations? People say, what do you do? How long you been there? What's the weather like? And what came to me is, I said, well, when people ask me, what do I do? As a general strategy, I like checking, are they actually facing me and settled in like they want to have a conversation? Or are they, about to go get a drink or leave the room? In which case, I'll make up anything. And sometimes I make up something that's a little bit silly. Or I'll throw out some aspect of myself to see, I'll say I'm an actor, which is true, but it's a small part of what I do. See if they're interested. And one of the ways I slow it down is say I do lots of things. And if I want to go deeper with that, I'll say, word pleasure is a little hot, so I don't use that around most people. For my pleasure, but say for fun, to make money, or and usually they can feel my emphasis. I said, or what am I passionate about right now that I'm working on? And I give them a choice. I'm willing to go into any of those.
It's a litmus test for where the conversation is going to go.
Right. Or when I do say, what do you do? I say, well, I'll give them a few things. I'm an actor, a dancer, and a sex and intimacy coach. I'm a son and a father. Usually I give one off-ramp that feels safe enough, because somebody I don't know where to go with the acting, the dancing, or the sex and intimacy coach. But usually if you throw out a sentence that's some complexity, because we're all complex, then people find something where they can relate to. But at least it's within a menu of our interest, right? I was reflecting on this
the other day, last names used to be like what you did, right? Like
Cooper made barrels.
Right.
Shoemaker.
My grandfather on my mother's side is Gardner. That's the last name, her maiden name. And you know, I've taken on the mantle of Matt the poet, and I recognized that was kind of my way of adopting you know, it's not a surname per se, but it is what I'm passionate about, is what I do. It's, once again, a portion of what I do. It's one aspect of me, but it is an aspect that I'm willing to lead with, right? And in the doing so, you know, it has engaged more of that aspect. You know, you know, a person that's never met me hears that and it's suddenly intrigued to hear some poetry, and it brings the poetry out, and it's a fun experience to put that front and center, you know, and you know, it's, yeah, it's a fun way of skirting the norm, right?
Yeah, it's skirting the norm, and I want to suggest it does something else too. I speculate that if you say your full legal name,
Yeah,
and then you say Matt the poet,
yes,
there's a very different energetic sound if somebody didn't even speak the language.
yeah,
Matter of fact, if you just hummed those two things, they'd come out differently.
mm-hmm.
There's like a vibration to Matt the poet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this comes to a concept that I talked about with you before, about like that we embody we are an embodied invitation at all times.
Yes.
And what are we inviting people to?
Yeah.
And we feel the energy.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, if you were to speak it like Matt the poet,
yeah,
nobody's really going to follow that.
Yeah.
There's no invitation there.
Yeah.
It's an invitation to look away and get quiet and disappear.
Yeah. Yeah. A fun experience for me is, because this is honestly not coming from an egoic place. I can say that quite honestly, and because it's actually been difficult to step into that role of you know, and it was a request from, you know, what I call spirit, to take on the mantle, right, and to introduce myself as this. And for me, it was a challenge. It was like, okay, well, let me try this on. And what I've experienced many times over is people hear that and instantly go to, this guy's got an ego. And then maybe it moseys into me sharing my poetry. And then once they see my poetry or hear my poetry and experience that, there's a tendency to be like, oh, I get it. I understand why you've taken this mantle.
What is your mantle?
The poet.
Let me try something with you. What is your name?
Matt the poet.
Yeah, I'm not getting like an egoic vibe. Me, I call into question whether people go there. If it was said in a flat way, maybe, but I get it as like you're claiming something and that you're up to something.
Yeah.
You know, matter of fact, I don't know if you've ever done mirror play, but you could say that name like 30 times in front of a mirror.
Yeah.
In different ways, and it can be a good discovery game.
Yeah.
How we want to say a name.
Yeah.
And I had a little bit of similar process as I expanded my name.
Yes.
Which was Michael.
Yes.
The name my mother gave me, to include the name of my grandfather. First as a playful thing with a lover who said she had a dream that my name was changing to John. And then I put them together, and just, it was really like a energetic field that had me shapeshift. in a way that I was getting immediate, specific, and clear feedback from people that how I was showing up was what was wanted and needed, and how they appreciated and felt safe and attracted to me. Like, wow, what's in a name, right? So John Michael doesn't say what I do for a living, but how I say it to people reveals something, and it depends on, the mood or how open I feel, and if it's man or woman, time of day. But when I'm willing to convey more of me, and I say it that way, it does open the door to other conversations and a conveyance of what you're up to something.
Yes. Yeah.
Yours says probably poetry, but you are more than verses.
Yes.
I'd say you live a poetic life.
Absolutely. There's this understanding in a lot of books on magic, right? That the name is a powerful, like, to know someone's true name is to know them on a level that has power over them or with, there is,
Interesting. Power over.
Power over, power of, right? And the vibration of a name imbues it with power. And I know there's certain indigenous tribes that I believe the mother gives the child their sacred or spiritual name, and only those two individuals know that name. That way, you could never be the individual could never be cursed.
Interesting.
And there's an interesting vulnerability within the claiming of one's true name. Now, what is a true name? I don't know. I've had so many nicknames in my lifetime.
Me too.
That, each one represents a different time period in my life, a different social group, a different this, and a different that, and a different aspect of self. And it's like, have I ever stumbled upon my true name, across this experience? And I'd say Matt the Poet certainly feels the closest to that experience.
I wonder whether the name we're going by at a time is our true name, because when I was Mike, it kind of felt like that, I was Michael. When I chose that at 26, I was traveling and realized I could say my name was Sam if I wanted to. So I would say it's Mike or Michael, and I realized it didn't really serve people to be faced with that choice, because they didn't want to call me the name that a lover called me or the one that my mom called me when she was mad. So it's like, what do you prefer? So Michael, but I was also Wazzy, those are my last names, and I could feel myself becoming those. I've actually, in common ritual for me is hape.
Yes.
And a practice I have that I really appreciate. I put my hand over my heart and just say, I love you. And I say my name, John Michael, and it feels so true, true name right now. And just I feel a vibration. But I've also gone back and said names of old, which sometimes makes me giggle a little bit, but there's like really something there, like that I could love those chapters.
Yeah.
And it dispels a little bit of the notion that that my growth is better, or that I'm a better person, or Because I sometimes have that opinion.
Yeah.
I like my life more. I wouldn't want to go back.
Yeah.
But is my name more true? It's which came first, the name or the being? In some ways, that name drew parts out of me that were, I want to say, latent. More true? I don't know. Yeah, I kind of like the story that it's true. I don't like the story that there might be a more truer name that I need to be thinking about, go to the mental process, or look at a name of a book of names like the baby book.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just so interesting. I share this the reference to, there was a moment in time where I heard, the intuitive spirit, within, say, introduce yourself as Matt the poet. And I also have, friends out there who have claimed other names than their birth name, right? And I have other friends out there that think that's a ridiculous process.
Right.
Yeah. And there's an interesting aspect of that where you meet the waters, you meet the aspens, you meet the individuals who have taken on new names and given themselves their own name, and it's like there's a beautiful autonomy to that, a sovereignty.
Are you talking about trees and water? Or are you talking about people?
I'm talking about people.
Oh, okay, people with those names. Yeah.
People with those names. Yeah.
Gotcha.
The interesting aspect for me was a nickname is often given to you. It's kind of a faux pas or odd to see someone who has given themselves their own nickname, right?
So they say.
Yeah.
That's what I'll say about that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, yeah. But this process feels like a different thing, right? Where it's there's some sort of transformation that happens when these individuals are claiming a new name, right? And it doesn't feel like adoption of a nickname. It feels like a shedding of a skin.
Interesting.
Yeah, and an adoption of a new state of being. Yeah.
I chose my own playa name.
Yes.
Burning Man. And what I think is funny about that is that there is a they that say that it has to be given to you.
Yeah.
And I like to say, well, there's also a they that says you can choose your own name.
Yeah.
Let the theys come together and have an argument.
May the best they win.
And as evidenced from how people so receptively called me by this name,
yeah,
I'm going to say people did give me that name. I suggested it.
Yeah.
But then the response was, oh, yeah, obviously, or that makes sense.
Yeah. And
it was a name I chose because it was what I was calling into life. And indeed, it empowered that. I had fun with it.
Yes.
And that name is Pleasure. Well said. Now, say it in a very flat way, because this was something I had fun with and play. I go, my name is Pleasure.
Pleasure.
No. The person's usually confused. Pleasure.
Pleasure.
And then I would notice the pleasure that the person is saying it, right? Because what is that? Is that onomatopoeia? Like when a word sounds like...
Yes.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Like water almost feels like, rushing like this.
Mm-hmm.
So pleasure. And watching people say it was part of my pleasure and for them to feel it and kind of like that. It also helped to call that forth. So
yeah,
I'm a rule breaker when it comes to that.
Yeah.
Plus, I would, as Burning Man, I would say, wait a minute, that's one of the rules of Burning Man.
Yeah.
Kick me out.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that points to the farce that rules are in general, right? You know, rules are only as real as the collective agreement to them persists, and yeah, it's we see this time and time again when we're given new permission slips to escape these rules, you know. And
yes, and I want to say that sometimes, you know, those of us who seek to break the rules, create new conventions, in essence, we're sometimes creating new conventions that can become, you know, new age or more authentic, right? The right way to do it. Like I've seen in some places, and maybe I've done it myself, is that more authentic can deem to be more emotional or more what do you call it? Emotive.
yeah,
Emotive. And I've watched some of that sometimes and gone, that emoting doesn't feel that authentic. So it's a funny thing.
yeah,
Brings us back full circle. Is like, what's authentic? When I made up my own name, that felt pretty fucking authentic to me.
yeah.
And hearing people say it back and notice how my body felt, and I'm like, yeah. So
Yeah, that can...
what is authentic, and how do we know? And
yeah, I mean, we took on a character at Unison, or you and I. Bubble!
Don't get me started. No, not on the podcast.
Yeah.
No, we don't do that.
We gotta do it on the podcast.
No, come on. This feels authentic right now. I'm saying
It feels pretty authentic to me.
that's why it was hard to get out of it.
Yeah. But it raises the question: is a character such as Bubble is he any more or less authentic than the spiritually activated you know, individual who is high and mighty and perhaps you know, spiritually bypassing a lot, you know?
Yeah.
Like, is there anything like there's this hierarchy within some spiritual communities of like, oh, I am love and light, and you know, and they transcendent sort of, but it's like Aubrey Marcus always likes to say, and I like this, if you're Jesus, that's great, but if you're not, accept that, and you know, and don't try and be Jesus, right? Or don't hold yourself to the accountability of, oh, I have to be of this utmost character, because truly I'm human and I'm growing, and obviously I want to grow towards my most perfect and authentic self, which is represented by the figure of Jesus. But if I'm not Jesus and my reaction is harsh and you know, let that be the truth as well, you know. And
Yeah, I just remember a point in my life where I was modulating my voice to a culture that I was immersed in. It was when I was traveling in Asia, and I had, this is like my fourth Vipassana 10-day meditation course.
Yeah.
And I was living at the center. I did a back-to-back with a service in between, so I was living at the center. And, you know, every place, festivals have different ways of being. We might find that we're like more animated in our bodies. You know, this can be beautiful. And if we just go to festivals back to back to back, you know, what is authentic, and what is like a nuance or put on? If you've ever seen any of those spoofs of the spiritually minded festival goers who have all the language and the things.
Yeah.
But in the meditation center, it was more like a modulated voice, which made sense. Talk a little quieter. There were also precepts that we were observing, which were Buddhist precepts to not do harm and so on. And when you're in a center with everybody who's like mindful of that, and mindfulness is the key, it can become hyper vigilant. Like, don't want to have wrong speech. So
Yeah.
everything could be modulated, like this.
Yeah.
I'm going to go get water for everyone.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
what's the highest, and that can get a little funny too, because we develop a concept of ourselves that maybe that we're Buddha or Jesus.
Yeah.
And when anger does come up, especially you go outside the center and it comes up, there's can be this harshness of no, I can't have that reaction.
And then suddenly there's repression, and repression leads to...
And that is how you build a bomb.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I call it. It's a psychic time bomb that you're setting. Yeah. Along those same lines, it brought up I read the book on nonviolent communication. And while I found the notion of the book to be powerful, right? At the same time, it felt like a very clunky system that if I ever had to actually adopt that as the way that I spoke in the world, I think it would be exasperating. And I think there's...
So I just want to say that what I hear you saying is that if you were to ever speak like that way in the world, on a regular basis, it would be exasperating.
Yes.
And then you made it sound like this. Did I get that right?
Yes, you mirrored that back to me perfectly.
If I hadn't, then you would need to speak it again, and then I would repeat it back, and we'd get that straight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I, like I said, I find the notion of it to be great, a fantastic desire to be more attuned to how our words are affecting others.
It's way better than violent communication.
Sure. Except when violence is wanting to be communicated, correct? But yeah, I sometimes encounter that type of speech, and I'm like, okay, this is the type of conversation that I've entered into, or this is what's available right here, right now. And I guess there's a yearning from within me to have that same level of attunement, but with the improvisational and experiential aspect of, life is better messy, to be quite honest.
Would you explain that to the folks who were in the teepee with me? When I said, it's fucking hot in here, could somebody open the flap?
What was the result of
the sweat lodge? I mean,
yeah,
sweat lodge, yeah. It's fucking hot in here.
Well, it's fucking hot in here.
All right, I didn't say that, but inside, that's what was happening.
That was what you were wanting to say.
Yeah, and I'm like, I'm gonna work within the protocol here.
Yeah, and I don't know. That does call into question. That's like stepping in a church and cursing, right? And it's like, what is the balance between the sacred and the profane, right? What's that?
Or using the word orgy with my mother. I don't need to explain that to her.
No. Right. It comes down to this balance between the sacred and the profane, and the part of me that loves a little bit of chaos, loves the profane finding its way into all states and all spaces. But there's also that divine desire of mine to see a purification, of intention and of sacredness, of spaces that remain pure because they are held with such a way that keeps them impeccable.
I like the mix of sacred and profane. Don't get me started. Here goes a big conversation.
Hey, Dick. You like mixing in the profane, don't you?
Hey, did I Did I show you my new watch?
Hey, that's a watch right there.
It is a watch. Which is a way of saying,
Is it time?
I'm feeling it's time.
It might be
I
time.
have a road trip coming up.
You have a road trip. You gotta go many miles.
I'm going to see, what is this theater group? Oh my goodness, I'm going to come back with ideas. I'll report on that. I'm going to think of the name. It's called Sensatia is the show.
Yeah.
And they're like a mix between burlesque and Cirque du Soleil.
Ooh,
How's that sound?
sounds fun.
Yeah, I'll report.
I've actually thought about leading a sexy acro class at some point. Yeah.
No, the super slow, sexy supper club might like a performance by
the sexy acro club. Acro squad.
All right, we'll talk.
We'll talk. Your people talk to my people. We'll make it happen.
I don't have any people. Yeah,
You've got plenty of people. What are you talking
I got people. All right.
about? Well, it's been a pleasure.
Are you talking to me? Pleasure.
It appears that I'm talking to pleasure.
All right, Matt. Matt the poet.
Pleasure.
It has been a pleasure.
Yes, indeed.
Until the next time.